Hello everyone and welcome to week 6 of English 200, 201, and 202. This week, before we get going, I want to bring to your attention a formal assignment that's due. It's not due till April 5th, but you are required to enter the 2019 Napa Valley College Jessamine West Writing Contest as a member of Creative Writing. If you are in English 200, you only have to enter in one genre, and we will have written in all three of these genres by the time that you'll be entering. If you're in English 201 or 202, you need to enter at least one entry in all three genres. The details of the Jessamine West Writing Contest, and believe me, I'll be going over this more when we get closer to the date. Again, this is not due until April 5th. But the details about this contest are the English department invites you to enter your unpublished works of short fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction. And first, second, and third prize winners will be selected in each of the categories. First prize gets $150, second prize gets $100, and third prize gets $50. And we will have a big ceremony to celebrate the winners, and where you'll be asked to read your work aloud if you're the first place winner. All winners will also have their work published in the Jessamine West Creative Writing Contest Anthology, and winners will receive entry to all public events, including craft lectures and readings at the 2019 Napa Valley Writers Conference this summer, and it takes place July 28th through August 2nd. Let me tell you that the Napa Valley Writers Conference is a really amazing week. I am the poetry director, and so I get to be there every single year, and I'm that lucky. The craft lectures are lectures given by writers who are the best in their field, and they go into detail as to how to create remarkable creative writing. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When your entries will be screened by the English department, and the final judges will be professional writers outside of the college, and hopefully those writers will come to the ceremony and congratulate you for winning. Participants may enter a maximum of one story, one essay, and 5 poems. Remember, if you're in English 201 or 202, you need to enter at least one story, one essay, and 1 poem. All entries must be typed in a standard 12-point font and should be original and previously unpublished works. Fiction and nonfiction entries should be typed double-spaced with an inch or 1.5-inch margin and should not exceed 20 pages. Poetry, you can enter up to 5 poems, and each poem has to be on its own page, no more than 1 poem per page. If one or more poems are longer than 1 page, the total number of poems must be reduced so that the entire manuscript is no more than 5 pages. Your name should not appear anywhere on the manuscript, and we only accept electronic entries. So there's a link to the form at the bottom of this page. You can also email your submissions to Gina Stofan, and her email address is written here. You're also welcome to come to my office hours to go over any of the work that you want to submit. I will not be screening I'm not a screener because I teach you guys creative writing, so I want you all to win. So I'm not allowed to work on this contest except to tell you guys to enter it and to help run the ceremony. So please enter, and by all means come visit me and talk about what you want to enter in the contest. All right, so this week, we're in week 6, you guys. You're going to be reading a very short portion of our textbook, Serious Daring. We're going to be reading Destination Creative Nonfiction, pages 75 to 77. You're also going to read an essay by Ross Gay that is a stunning essay. And it's the link here tells you where to go. And then The book we're going to be reading this week is a short creative nonfiction piece called Citizen by Claudia Rankine. And our writing exercises will be based on Citizen by Claudia Rankine. So please make sure you read the entire book. Believe me, it's not very long and it's so mesmerizing. You are going to want to read the whole thing. Okay, so let's start. Before we talk about Ross Gay's essay, I want to talk a little bit about what creative nonfiction is. So creative nonfiction is a new genre we're going to be working in this week, and it's one of my favorites, second only to poetry. Creative nonfiction is also known as literary nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, the lyric essay, and basically it differs from other forms of nonfiction, like news reporting or research papers, which you've probably come across in school, or technical writing or business writing, because it uses literary methods to bring fact-based stories to life. For example, in Ross Gay's essay, he uses an extended metaphor as a way to frame his essay about dealing with being an African American man in American society today. But the story starts in his garden and it ends in his garden, with him talking to us about working with bees. Couple more things. Literary nonfiction, or creative nonfiction, as I like to call it, is really grounded in fact and memory. You are going to be it's usually in a very distinctive voice. Usually it's written using the first person, I, that pronoun. But for this week's exercise, you're actually going to be writing in the second person. You're going to be directly addressing the audience by using the you pronoun. Most creative nonfiction works on the idea of self-examination and discovery. And it really is important that whenever you write about yourself in creative nonfiction, that you realize that you're neither perfect nor completely flawed, right? Like most human beings. And the more you write about being real, the more engaging your work will become. All right. We'll be talking about creative nonfiction a great deal. This is just your introductory week. I hope you had fun writing poetry. I do want to let you know, and I'll be talking about this more, that if you did love writing poetry and you want to do more of it, in April, I'll be teaching a really quick 4-week session on, it's a workshop on writing poetry, and it is an in-person class at the Upper Valley campus. I believe it's from 3 to 4:30 on Mondays, every Monday in April. I will post details about this next week, but if poetry is something you want to continue to work in, that would be a really great low pressure place to write and to and to workshop your work. We'll get to do a lot more hands-on workshopping than we do in this class. All right, back to creative nonfiction. So Ross Gay, and who's an amazing poet, who you should really check out if you haven't already. His essay, Some Thoughts on Mercy, raises the following questions about how to address systematic racism in the United States. And this is a quote from the essay. But what if we acknowledge those fears, regardless of how awful or shameful they are? What if we acknowledge this country's terrible and ongoing history of imagining its own citizens, Indigenous, Black, Japanese American, Arab American, Latino, as monsters? What if we acknowledge the drug war and the resulting mass incarceration of African Americans and the myriad intermediate crimes against citizens and communities as a product of our fears? And what if we thereby had to reevaluate our sense of justice and the laws and procedures and beliefs that constitute it? What if we honestly assessed what we have come to believe about ourselves and each other and how those beliefs shaped our lives? And what if we did it with generosity and forgiveness? What if we did it with mercy? So the premise of this essay is Ross Gay intimately telling you about his experiences as an African American man living in Indiana, being profiled by police, and the way he has, the micro racism that's happened to him all throughout his life. But the story that he's telling is one of how to approach it as a country. Like the essay's asking us, how could we come to this issue, this question, this problem with mercy rather than with anger or rage or fear. And he uses this astounding metaphor to frame this essay of beekeeping. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with bees before. I certainly haven't. Everything I've learned about bees has been through literature. But when he talks about getting a bunch of bees for his garden, he talks about how the bees approach him with mercy. And even though he has the worst fears about them, they're able to let that go and approach him with mercy. And it's a really interesting take on how to approach any form of difference that exists between people. And I think it's a really good opener to get you thinking about the space that we're going to be moving into next when we read Citizen. So here's an excerpt from Citizen by Claudia Rankine. A woman you do not know wants to join you for lunch. You are visiting her campus. In the cafe, you both order the Caesar salad. This overlap is not the beginning of anything, because she immediately points out that she, her father, her grandfather, and you all attended the same college. She wanted her son to go there as well, but because of affirmative action or minority something, she is not sure what they are, or minority something, she's not sure what they're calling it these days, and weren't they supposed to get rid of it? Her son wasn't accepted. You are not sure if you are meant to apologize for this failure of your alma mater's legacy program. Instead, you ask where he ended up. The prestigious school she mentions doesn't seem to assuage her irritation. This exchange, in effect, ends your lunch. The salads arrive. And here's another one. A friend argues that the Americans battle between the, quote, historical self and the, quote, self-self. By this she means you mostly interact as friends with mutual interest and, for the most part, compatible personalities. However, sometimes your historical selves, her white self and your black self, or your white self and her black self, arrive with the full force of your American positioning. Then you are standing face to face in seconds that wipe the affable smile right from your mouths. What did you say? Instantaneously, your attachment seems fragile, tenuous, subject to any transgression of your historical self. And though your joined personal histories are supposed to save you from misunderstandings, they usually cause you to understand all too well what is meant. So, Claudia Rankine in her essay explores the difference between the historical self and the self-self, as is expressed in everyday society for her as an African American woman. And what I want you to do after reading this book and really absorbing it is to think about your own the things that define who you are as a person. I want you to draw a series of at least 5 nested circles with yourself and your innermost self at the center. Then I want you to fill out each circle with groups that you're a part of, somehow starting with, you can start with things like your gender or your ethnicity, your closest family and friends, your wider set of friends in our school or job or profession, your community, whether you live in a town or a city, or other similar identities such as groups you belong to. And then you can go out to define yourself by the country you live in or the parts of the world you identify with. So, for example, if I were to be making circles for myself, I identify as a woman, so I would put a circle with woman in it, and I'd think about, what it means to be a woman in our society. I also am a mother of two boys, so I'd put that in another circle. I'm also a wife, and so that's another identity. My profession is a professor, but I also like to put another circle that says writer, because as a writer, I'm also, that also defines who I am based on what society thinks I am and what I think I am. And then I'm also an athlete, which is often at conflict with, being a writer, being an intellectual of some sort. So I'm like a strong-bodied person, and so I like to put that in its own circle. Another thing is, and that goes against society as well, especially as a woman, being muscly is, it goes against what the gender norm is in our society. And I could also put something like American, I'm an American, or I live in a rural area, so I could put that, and that's very different from somebody who lives in a city. And there's expectations about my beliefs because I live in a rural area. So I would make, I could make like 10, 15 circles, and I want you to make as many circles as you want. And I want you to see which ones really, really seem to make the most tension for you between who you are and who really society or our country or the world expects you to be. Like, what is the stereotypical thing you should be as a wife or as a mother or as a father or as a student versus who you really are? So, as your journal, I'd like you to explore that. So write about these identity circles and how they interact for you, which ones you most identify with, and what the gap is between how the world sees you, how the world sees you as that person versus who you really are. Then I want you to do the hard work of, I want you to think about which of those circles you want to focus on. I want you to focus on one, okay? And I want you to write an essay. And if you've taken this class before, you can't focus on the same one, okay? You got to do a new one. We've got lots of circles, people, all right? So I want you to write an essay where you address your readers in the second person. You have to write it in the second person. And I want you to try to listen to all the things in regards to one topic and filter them through yourself. So I want you to challenge the self-self and the historical self. Play with the space between these two things, right? So what does society think you need to be as a woman? And who are you really? I want you to start by listing a part of yourself that you want to explore. Are you a mother? Are you a daughter? Are you an American? Are you an African American? Are you, just choose one of those circles that you feel the most tension with, right? Could be like body image stuff. Like, I've recently written a whole essay about having athletic build versus what I see on television and what I see in films, right? Of what a woman should look like. Even if she appears strong, she's supposed to still look really, really small. And I don't look very small. So that difference but if I was a man, it would be okay if I was really big. Like, think of The Rock, right? Dwayne Johnson is huge, and that's celebrated, right? So for me, that space, I would dive into the difference between how that makes me feel, how it shapes who I am. And I want you to dive into exploring through association what your definition of this is for yourself and what the cultural, historical definition of this is for you. And I want you to give me I want you to make me feel what it's like to be in this in-between space between these two worlds, okay? So you're going to say in the second person, and by writing in the second person, I'm really going to feel what you are feeling. As a reader, I'm going to feel what you are feeling. Now, the more effort you put into this, the better. I keep the assignments really limited on this week because I'll tell you, if you put your heart into this work, to this particular assignment, it can be a real breakthrough assignment for you. I see some of the finest writing every semester from this assignment from my students. So please dive in, really go for it, okay? I can't wait to read what you write. All right, and for you English 201, 202 writers, you are killing it. Nice job with your poem a day. Today's prompt is to write a poem with the word Hansel in it. and you can look up the definition by following the link. Tomorrow, you're to write a prose poem where you use some form of punctuation as a way to mark the line breaks. I have a link here to Alice Notley's The Descent of Alette. It's a whole book of prose poems written with quotation marks as the breath pause instead of line breaks. So take a look at the examples in that link. For the 21st, I want you to choose an object that you've never really given much attention to, but you see it frequently in your home or on your commute, or maybe it's like a houseplant or a mailbox or a street sign. And I want you to spend some time intensely observing it, and then jot down a thorough physical description, and then afterwards write a poem about the object. How did your perception of it change in your mind's eye after going through the exercising of articulating it in language? For February 22nd, I want you to write a poem that consists of a series of questions, all revolving around one topic or concern. In what ways do the types of questions and their progression reveal both your current state of mind and your hopes for the future? On the 23rd, I want you to write a poem where you consider this. Construction workers renovating a building in Valdosta, Georgia, last week, or several weeks ago, discovered approximately 1,000 teeth buried in a wall on the second floor. Historical researchers attribute the discovery and the teeth found in walls in 2 other cities in Georgia to the spaces having been occupied by dentists in the early 1900s. Write a poem inspired by the imagery, secrets, and possibilities evoked by these bizarre findings. How do the buildings and architecture that surround us hold and reveal local history? And then on the 24th, this is a big one. In Cornelius Eady's book, Brutal Imagination, he responds to the notorious 1994 incident in which Susan Smith, a white woman from South Carolina, claimed that an African-American man had kidnapped her children. The FBI searched for the man until Smith confessed the truth. She had invented the man and had drowned her own children. Eady creates a detailed persona of the imaginary suspect based on cultural fears and stereotypes. Create a persona poem where the speaker is an imaginary character that represents collective fear or misunderstandings about something. Okay, you can. It doesn't have to be about the African American experience. It can be about any experience, and maybe you've identified something through this work in your citizen essay. For February 25th, I want you to write a poem in the second person that includes the words shale, oak tree, buzz, and crystal. And then for February 26th, I want you to write a poem where you dispel you're not going to use any punctuation. You're going to mess with line breaks and syntax, and you're going to write impressionistically. So get as weird as possible on that one. On February 27th, I want you to write a poem about your favorite sport or activity, or if you can't do that, I want you to write a poem about an event from your past in which circumstances beyond your control transformed what would have been a more standard situation into something decidedly more dramatic. And then February 28th, the last day, I know I'm giving you more than a week, but I wanted to give them ahead of time. You're going to write a poem in a form that you've never tried before. And there's a list of forms, a very long list of forms available here. All right, guys, that is it for this week. Great job so far. I really enjoy what you guys are doing in your writing. As always, you can stop by my office hours. I'm available Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30 and 1:30 to 3. If you bring a piece of writing, we can go over it in detail. Or you can just come and talk about poetry or creative nonfiction or fiction for that matter. All right. I'll see you guys online.